Robert Mueller just died. Good, I'm glad he's dead. He can no longer hurt innocent people. President Donald J. Trump.
It was a statement celebrating the death of a man who had served in the U.S. government for decades. And almost immediately, it raised a major question. What made Trump hold such a deep grudge against Robert Mueller? To understand that reaction, it helps to go back to who Robert Mueller was. He was appointed director of the FBI just 1 week before the September 11 attacks. At that moment, no one could imagine that the United States was about to enter one of the most tense national security periods in modern history. After the terrorist attacks on September 11, the FBI had to restructure almost its entire operation. From an agency that had focused heavily on domestic crime, the FBI shifted its priority toward global counterterrorism. Mueller became the leader of the bureau throughout that transformation. He ran the FBI during the years when the United States expanded its counterterrorism networks, tracked international threats, and rebuilt parts of its domestic security system. To many observers, Mueller looked like the model of a professional public servant, rarely appearing in the media, almost never making political statements, and consistently maintaining a low profile. But that low-profile reputation did not protect him from becoming the target of a fierce political battle after the U.S. presidential election of 2016, when U.S. intelligence agencies concluded that Russia had interfered in the election. The Department of Justice appointed Mueller as special counsel to investigate. His mission focused on two major questions: whether Russia had actually interfered in the U.S. election, and whether there were any links between Trump's campaign and individuals connected to Russia. The investigation lasted nearly 2 years and became one of the most controversial political episodes in modern American history. The results of that investigation were not zero, as many Trump supporters often claim. In reality, Mueller's team charged 34 individuals and 3 companies with various crimes. Some of those individuals were people who had once been very close to Trump during the campaign. Paul Manafort, Trump's campaign chairman, was convicted on charges related to financial fraud and conspiracy against the U.S. government. Rick Gates, the deputy campaign chairman, pleaded guilty to similar offenses. Michael Flynn, Trump's former national security advisor, pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI about his contacts with Russian officials. George Papadopoulos, a foreign policy advisor in the Trump campaign, also pleaded guilty to making false statements to the FBI. Roger Stone, a longtime Trump ally, was convicted of obstructing an investigation and lying to Congress. And Michael Cohen, who had been Trump's personal lawyer for many years, pleaded guilty in cases involving financial violations and false statements to Congress. That list does not look like a witch hunt. It looks like a criminal investigation that produced concrete outcomes, with a series of charges and convictions presented in federal court. But throughout the entire process, Trump repeatedly described the Mueller investigation with a familiar phrase: witch hunt, a political persecution. To Trump, Mueller was not simply a prosecutor carrying out an investigation. He was an enemy. And over time, the investigation became one of the central reasons Trump came to view Mueller as a symbol of everything he believed was wrong with the political system in Washington. However, the story does not stop there. One of the most controversial points lies in the contradiction in how Trump and people close to him judge Mueller and his investigation. While Trump called Mueller a bad guy, he also publicly praised and defended figures who completely rejected the findings of the investigation. One such person was Pam Bondi, who served as Attorney General in the Trump administration. Bondi repeatedly claimed that the Mueller investigation found no evidence of Russian interference in the 2016 election, but that statement directly contradicted what the investigation itself had already documented: indictments, convictions, and guilty pleas from people who had worked in Trump's campaign. That contradiction has been pointed out by many political observers. On one side was a special counsel who spent nearly 2 years gathering documents, testimony, and evidence. On the other side were political statements dismissing the entire process, even though federal courts had confirmed many of the related crimes. But instead of acknowledging the complexity of the investigation, Trump chose a far simpler strategy, attacking Mueller personally and targeting anyone associated with the investigation, And when Mueller died, Trump's reaction suggested that the political resentment had never really disappeared. But what made Donald Trump's response especially controversial was not just the content of that social media post. It reflected a broader pattern in how Trump often responds to people he sees as political enemies. For years, Trump has built a political style based on personal confrontation, direct attacks, and a near refusal to admit mistakes. When someone criticizes him, that person often quickly becomes the target of public attacks. And what is notable is that even after some of those figures have died, Trump has sometimes continued to use them as part of his political battles. In the case of Robert Mueller, that hostility grew out of the Russia investigation, an inquiry Trump consistently viewed as an effort to weaken his presidency. During Mueller's time as special counsel, Trump posted hundreds of messages criticizing the investigation, calling it a witch hunt, and accusing the justice system of being weaponized against him. For Trump supporters, Mueller became a symbol of what they call the deep state, a network of government officials and institutions they believe were trying to undermine Trump. But for many others, Mueller was simply a prosecutor assigned to investigate a serious question: whether a foreign power had interfered in a U.S. presidential election. Trump's reaction to Mueller's death also highlights another issue: ethical standards in politics. In recent years, American politics has seen many debates over how political leaders respond to the deaths of rivals or political partners. One example often mentioned is the killing of Charlie Kirk, a well-known conservative figure. When that event occurred, many leaders from the Democratic Party quickly condemned the violence and expressed condolences to the victim's family. Statements from politicians such as Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, and Gavin Newsom emphasized a shared message: political violence has no place in a democracy. That is why, when Trump publicly celebrated Mueller's death, many observers saw it as a sign of how much political standards may have shifted. In the past, even the most bitter political rivals usually maintained a basic level of respect after someone passed away. But in the modern political era, especially within Trump's style of politics, those boundaries appear to be fading. Instead of stopping at political disagreements, debates often turn into personal battles where opponents are treated not just as critics, but as enemies.